Why the universe calls the most broken souls. Alan Watts's most haunting truth. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi. Sometimes, the universe doesn't choose the strongest or the most perfect souls, it calls the most broken ones, because cracks are where truth can shine through. In today's video on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore why the universe calls the most broken souls, and how your deepest pain can become your greatest awakening. Have you ever felt like your suffering had a hidden purpose? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else walking through their darkness toward the light. 1. Brokenness is not a flaw, but a gateway. Brokenness is not a flaw, but a gateway. And once you begin to understand this truth, you start to see that spirituality and spiritual awakening often begin where the world believes your story ends. The universe doesn't reject broken souls. It calls them. And it calls them because the cracks inside a person are not marks of failure, but openings where light, wisdom, and grace can finally enter after years of holding everything together. Alan Watts often suggested that what we call our breaking point is really the moment life stops negotiating with who we pretend to be and begins shaping who we were meant to become. And when you look closely at your own journey, you may realize the moments that transformed you were rarely moments of comfort, but moments when something inside you cracked open and demanded honesty. The cracks within you are not signs that you are weak or unworthy. They are the very places where transformation begins, because when the outer shell shatters, the mask falls with it, and what remains is your raw, unfiltered self. The self the universe can finally speak to without interference. This is why the universe calls the broken. Because broken people are no longer trapped inside the illusion of perfection, no longer trying to convince the world or themselves that everything is under control. They are open. And openness is the foundation of spiritual awakening, because awakening cannot happen in a heart sealed shut by pride, denial, or fear. Brokenness softens you, deepens you, and makes you receptive in a way untouched people rarely understand. It teaches you to listen without ego, to feel without judgment, and to surrender without resistance. What you see as weakness is often the exact space where your greatest transformation is quietly preparing to enter. And it is in this space that the universe whispers, "Now that everything unnecessary has fallen away, you are finally ready. You are ready to see beyond the surface of your life, ready to notice the patterns that once repeated in the dark, ready to understand that your wounds were not punishments, but invitations to rise through a deeper awareness. Broken souls develop compassion because they have lived through nights without answers. They develop intuition because their inner world has been forced to navigate storms. They develop empathy because they know what it feels like to hold pain with no one watching. And it is through these qualities that the universe works, because the broken become bridges, people who help others cross from suffering to strength simply by existing with honesty and presence. In spirituality, every crack is a doorway, and every scar is a form of remembering, reminding you that the place you once thought was your ending is the beginning of who you are becoming. When you allow yourself to break, without rushing to glue the pieces back together, you make space for the universe to reshape you into someone wiser, calmer, and more aligned with your true path. This is the haunting truth Alan Watts tried to reveal. The most broken souls often become the most awakened because their pain forces them to see life not through the lens of ego, but through the lens of truth. And when truth enters, even through a crack, everything begins to change, not because you are perfect, but because you are finally open. Have you ever seen your own brokenness as a doorway to awakening? If you have, share your realization in the comments to inspire others on this path. If you're still learning to see the beauty within your wounds, comment, "I'm opening the gateway," to begin this sacred journey with us. 2. The universe chooses the broken because they're awake. The universe chooses the broken because they're awake. And within that awakening lies the deepest form of spirituality and spiritual development. Those who have endured darkness, heartbreak, or loss know something profound. Life cannot be controlled. When everything falls apart, when the illusions of safety and certainty crumble, you come face to face with what is real. Pain strips away the false layers you once believed were you, revealing the silent awareness beneath the soul that observes everything but clings to nothing. It's here, in this emptiness, that divine energy can finally flow through you. The people who have been crushed by life's weight often carry an aura of stillness because they no longer resist the unpredictable nature of existence. Their suffering taught them humility, and humility opens the soul. Unlike those who still believe they are self-sufficient, the broken know they are part of something larger, something infinite. They have stopped trying to play God and started to trust God. When Alan Watts said, "The crack is where the light gets in," he was speaking of this sacred vulnerability. The moment your heart breaks, the light of awareness rushes in. What once looked like punishment becomes purification. Every failure, every betrayal, every sleepless night becomes the fire that burns away what is false. This process isn't comfortable, but it's real. It shapes a person into someone the universe can use. Broken souls don't just survive. They transmit wisdom because their pain has softened them. They don't seek control anymore. They seek understanding. They no longer chase perfection. They embody presence. And that presence is power, not the loud kind that demands attention, but the silent strength that moves mountains through faith and surrender. In spirituality, this is where true transformation happens. When you are broken, your heart becomes spacious enough to hold contradictions, to feel grief and gratitude at the same time, to experience endings and beginnings in one breath. That expansion is spiritual development. It's the gradual realization that your suffering was not a punishment, but an initiation, preparing you to carry light into dark places. You learn compassion because you've lived what others fear. You recognize pain in someone's eyes because you've seen it in your own. And this awareness connects you deeply with life itself. It dissolves separation. So if you have been broken, remember, you were never chosen because you were perfect. You were chosen because you were real. The universe does not flow through the untouchable. It flows through the open. And the cracks in your heart are not flaws. They are the pathways through which grace enters. Through your humility, surrender, and courage to remain open, you become what the universe needs most. A vessel through which divine love can move freely, quietly, and powerfully into the world. 3. Historical and spiritual figures prove the pattern. Moses was not chosen because he was perfect, but because he doubted himself. His stutter became a symbol of divine communication that doesn't depend on eloquence, but on faith. David, despite his moral failures and inner conflicts, carried a heart that understood repentance and humility. His flaws carved space for divine love to express itself through vulnerability. Paul, haunted by the memories of his own cruelty, transformed that pain into compassion, becoming a messenger of grace. Each of these figures was broken in a different way, but their cracks became sacred openings through which light could enter. As Alan Watts once said, "The crack is where the light gets in, and it is in this light that true spiritual wisdom begins to form." The universe does not select those who appear strong and unshakable. It calls those who have faced their own darkness and have nothing left to prove. When you have been stripped of illusions, when you have faced your shadow and survived, you begin to move from pride to presence, from control to surrender. This is the mysterious law that Carl Jung often explored. The shadow, the hidden wound, is not something to destroy, but to integrate, because it contains the very power that leads to awakening. Every soul carries within it both light and darkness, and only by embracing both can one become whole. When you understand this, your suffering takes on new meaning. It is not punishment, but initiation. Your heartbreak, confusion, and loneliness are calls to awareness, invitations from the universe to awaken. The ones who have suffered most are often those who can guide others most deeply, because their wisdom is born not from theory, but from transformation. The universe works through broken vessels, because only those who have known emptiness can understand fullness. Only those who have fallen can teach the way back to light. So if you have ever felt like your flaws disqualify you, remember they may be your qualification. Your humility, your sensitivity, your capacity to feel deeply are not weaknesses, but sacred instruments. The universe does not need your perfection. It needs your openness. It needs your willingness to let your pain become purpose, your wounds become wisdom, and your chaos become clarity. This is the essence of spiritual wisdom. The realization that our brokenness is not the end, but the beginning of transformation. Like clay in the hands of a master, you are being shaped by every loss, every failure, every silent night of the soul. And though you may not see it now, one day you will understand that everything that broke you was actually breaking you open to love, to truth, and to the divine awareness that has been waiting within you all along. If this message resonates with your spirit, repeat after me. I am chosen for a higher purpose, and my brokenness is becoming my strength. Let these words anchor your journey. Like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more guidance on your awakening. 4. Damage creates transformation, not destruction. Damage is never the end of your story, because in the world of spirituality, breaking is simply the moment when the soul begins to reshape itself into who it was always meant to be. When Alan Watts said that the crack is where the light gets in, he was pointing to a truth that many overlook. What feels like collapse is often the universe carving out space for your spiritual awakening. A cracked cup still holds water, not because it is perfect, but because its imperfections do not erase its purpose. They remind you that usefulness and beauty can exist even in what has been fractured. In the same quiet way, a seed must break open underground before it can rise toward the sun. And this breaking is not a failure. It is the requirement for growth. Life uses these simple metaphors to teach you something profound. The moments that hurt the most often carry the greatest potential for transformation. Pain does not enter your life to destroy you. It arrives as a force that reshapes you from the inside, loosening the old patterns, beliefs, and identities that can no longer hold who you are becoming. This is why Carl Jung taught that there is no coming to consciousness without pain, because spiritual awakening is less about gaining something new and more about releasing everything that is false. When you feel broken, you are not being punished. You are being invited to rise. Every crack you carry is a doorway. Every wound is an opening. Every loss is a clearing of space within you that allows a deeper self to emerge. People who have never been shattered often cling to their surface identity. But those who have been broken know what lies beneath the surface: resilience, compassion, and a strength that cannot be taught by comfort. The universe calls its most broken souls not because they are weak, but because they are capable of holding wisdom the untouched cannot understand. The fire you survived becomes the light you carry. Breaking strips away illusion. It dissolves the version of you that was shaped by fear, expectation, or survival. Just as the caterpillar must dissolve completely before becoming the butterfly, your old self must break apart so that a truer self can form. This is why what feels like the worst moment of your life often becomes the turning point that reveals who you really are. You begin to see with new eyes. You begin to feel with a deeper heart. You begin to understand that your story is not ending. It is beginning again in a purer form. Damage does not make you less. It makes you more. It does not replace your identity with emptiness. It replaces the old identity with one that is wiser, clearer, and more aligned with your soul. Brokenness becomes the sculptor of your awakening, shaping you into someone who has walked through darkness and learned how to guide others toward light. And this is why, in the vast design of spirituality, only the cracked soul can hear the call of transformation, because only the broken understand how to rise reborn. 5. Broken people learn trust, surrender, and flow. Broken souls learn trust, surrender, and flow because suffering strips away everything that once felt stable, forcing them into a new kind of awareness where control is no longer possible and resistance only leads to deeper pain. Alan Watts captures this truth when he says that when you learn to swim, you learn by relaxing and floating. And the broken understand this lesson not through theory, but through lived experience. Instead of fighting the current of life as they once did, they begin to float, to let life move them, guide them, and shape them without trying to force outcomes. This is the essence of Wu Wei, the ancient principle of effortless action, where you respond to life rather than struggle against it, acting from alignment rather than fear. When everything you once depended on collapses, you naturally begin to recognize that life flows more easily when you stop gripping it too tightly, and this shift becomes the quiet beginning of true spirituality. Through repeated heartbreak, disappointment, and loss, the broken learn that certainty is fragile and that trying to control every moment only creates more tension inside the heart. So instead, they slowly start trusting the deeper movements of the universe, the subtle ways life rearranges itself, the moments of synchronicity that appear when they least expect it, the clarity that shows up once the noise falls away. This surrender is not weakness, but a profound form of spiritual development, because only those who have suffered deeply understand the freedom that comes from letting go. You begin to sense that a larger intelligence is always operating beneath the surface, guiding you toward what you need rather than what you want. And the more you relax into this rhythm, the more you realize that peace comes not from control, but from cooperation with life. Every difficult experience becomes a teacher, showing you that your strength does not come from resisting pain, but from allowing it to open you. You discover that when you release the need to predict or manage every outcome, you create space for new possibilities to enter, possibilities that feel aligned with your soul instead of shaped by fear. This is how the broken become wise. They learn to trust the flow of their own becoming, to accept the mystery of life rather than demanding answers, and to move with a gentler heart because they finally understand what it takes to survive the storms. They embody a quiet form of courage, a softness that is not weakness, but an advanced stage of spiritual development, where resilience comes from acceptance and clarity comes from surrender. And as you keep flowing with life instead of resisting it, you begin to recognize the universe's hidden design. The very pain that once fractured you is the same force that now aligns you. This is why broken souls often carry a rare depth, because suffering taught them how to feel, how to see beyond appearances, how to trust the unseen patterns of life. They learn to move without forcing, to act without tension, and to live in a way that reflects both humility and inner strength. In this state of surrender, you stop trying to swim upstream and instead let the current carry you exactly where you are meant to go, understanding at last that peace is not found in struggle, but in flow. Don't forget to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more insights on how spirituality turns pain into power and how brokenness teaches us trust, surrender, and flow. Let's keep growing together. Like, share, and stay tuned for more timeless truths from Alan Watts. 6. Brokenness awakens compassion and real humanity. When you have walked through pain long enough, you begin to understand that brokenness does something to the human soul that nothing else can achieve, because it cracks you open in places that were once sealed, forcing you to feel life with an intensity that others cannot even imagine. And this rawness becomes the birthplace of true compassion. You know this yourself. When you struggle, when you fail, when you lose someone or something you believed would stay forever, something inside you changes, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a quiet and irreversible shift. The heart softens, the judgment dissolves, the sharp edges you once used to protect yourself loosen their grip. Suddenly, you can see pain in people's eyes, even when they pretend to be fine. And you instinctively speak with more gentleness, not because someone taught you how to be kind, but because life carved that kindness into you through every dark night you survived. This is why spiritual wisdom teaches that suffering does not make you weaker. It makes you more human, more awake, more capable of carrying light in places where others collapse. And it is why Carl Jung said that only the wounded healer can truly understand the wounds of another. Because when you have tasted sadness, you stop treating other people's emotions like inconveniences. When you have been lonely, you stop overlooking the quiet souls who move silently through the world. When you have felt unseen, you naturally notice those who are always overlooked. This is the kind of compassion that is born from experience, not theory, and it cannot be faked. You do not just know what pain looks like, you know what it feels like, and that feeling becomes a compass that guides your actions, softens your responses, and deepens your capacity for love. Even your silence becomes comforting because people can sense that you are not judging them, that you are not pretending to understand what you truly understand. Alan Watts often said that the universe uses suffering as a teacher, not to punish you, but to transform you. And your life is living proof of that transformation. And as strange as it sounds, the moments that once shattered you are the very moments that now give you the ability to heal others. You can sit with someone else's darkness without flinching because you have sat with your own for longer than you admit. You can hold someone's fear without trying to fix it instantly because you learned that real comfort is not about solutions. It is about presence. You can forgive more easily because you know what it feels like to be misunderstood. And you can love more deeply because you have met the parts of yourself that felt unlovable. This is the quiet power of the broken soul, a power that grows not from perfection, but from survival, empathy, and truth. And though you may not always see it, this softness, this understanding, this ability to feel beyond the surface is the gift that makes you who you are. Not fragile, but profound. Not damaged, but awakened. 7. Your damage is your credential. The universe does not seek perfection. It seeks authenticity. It does not choose those who have never fallen, but those who have fallen and learned how to rise again. Your pain, your failures, and the scars that you carry are not signs of weakness. They are your credentials. Every wound has carved space inside you where wisdom now resides. Through your struggles, you have become more open, more compassionate, and more aware of the fragile beauty of existence. This is the paradox of spirituality and spiritual awakening. The more you are broken, the more you become whole, because the breaking opens you to a deeper truth that untouched hearts can never know. When everything you thought you were begins to collapse, when illusions are stripped away, what remains is raw and real. You begin to see that your suffering was not punishment, it was initiation. The universe was never trying to destroy you. It was shaping you, molding you into someone capable of carrying light into places that only darkness once occupied. Those who have never known despair cannot truly understand grace. Those who have never felt empty cannot appreciate the miracle of being filled again. That is why the universe calls the broken souls. It knows that only they can hold the delicate balance between power and humility, between knowing and not knowing. Every failure softens the ego. Every heartbreak dismantles the false self, and every moment of pain teaches you how to listen. Carl Jung once said that the wound is the place where the light enters you, and this is the very essence of spiritual wisdom. Your damage allows the divine to move through you freely, without pretense. It turns you into a living vessel of compassion because you no longer speak from theory, you speak from truth. You have felt the depth of darkness and can now guide others toward the light, not with sermons, but with presence. In the silence of your own suffering, you discovered that the soul speaks most clearly when the mind has been broken open. The beauty of brokenness is that it builds bridges where walls once stood. It connects hearts, not through perfection, but through shared humanity. When you embrace your story without shame, you invite others to do the same. You show them that pain can be transformed, that wounds can become wisdom, and that broken pieces, when arranged with love, can form something radiant. This is what spiritual awakening truly means. It is not escaping suffering, but transforming it into understanding, not denying pain, but using it as the material for light. So when the universe calls you in your brokenness, do not resist. It is not calling you because you are flawless, but because you are real. It is through your cracks that empathy flows, through your struggles that authenticity shines, and through your humility that collective healing begins. Every scar on your soul is a story of survival. Every tear, a baptism of strength, and every moment of despair, a quiet preparation for divine purpose. In your brokenness lies your greatest power, because it is there that the universe finds a voice it can finally trust. To honor your healing and transformation, take a moment to affirm it. Comment below, "My scars made me wise," to recognize that your pain was never punishment, it was preparation for your purpose. Your words might be exactly what another broken soul needs to see today. In the end, the message is clear. The universe does not call the most broken souls because they are weak, but because within their cracks lies the light that can guide others. As Alan Watts reminds us, what feels like your deepest wound can become your greatest source of wisdom, compassion, and spiritual growth. If this truth spoke to you today, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming insights. Thank you for being here, and may your journey continue with clarity and purpose. The empath's most dangerous transformation, Carl Jung's final warning. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung. There comes a moment in every empath's life when their kindness stops being a weakness and becomes their greatest weapon. This is the moment of dangerous transformation when compassion evolves into clarity and sensitivity becomes strength. Jung warned that the awakened empath is no longer easily controlled because they have learned to see the truth behind every mask. In today's video, we'll explore what happens when the light inside you learns to defend itself. Have you ever felt that your empathy has both healed and hurt you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone who's still finding their power. 1. The awakening of the dangerous empath. Carl Jung described the awakening of the dangerous empath as the moment a deeply kind and sensitive soul finally realizes their true power. And this transformation is not rooted in aggression, but in clarity. Because once you begin to trust your perceptions and stop doubting what your inner knowing has been telling you for years, you instantly become immune to the subtle manipulations that once shaped your choices. This shift marks a true spiritual awakening, where spirituality is no longer something you practice only in quiet moments, but something that lives inside every decision you make, because you start recognizing that your sensitivity was never a flaw. It was your compass. As this awareness strengthens, you begin integrating the parts of yourself you were taught to suppress, the quiet anger that protects your boundaries, the intuition that senses what words try to hide, and the deep emotional intelligence that notices the undercurrents others ignore. And instead of trying to appear easygoing, you allow these parts to rise and unify, forming a self that is whole, grounded, and impossible to deceive. This integration changes how you move through the world because you stop apologizing for your awareness, no longer softening the truth to protect someone else's comfort, and no longer shrinking to make yourself more palatable. You become the kind of empath who can look at a situation and see all the layers at once, not just what someone says, but what they mean. Not just the story they present, but the intention beneath it. This is what Jung meant when he said that the kindest souls become dangerous once they understand themselves. They stop abandoning their inner truth to keep the peace, and they stop confusing kindness with self-sacrifice. You learn that saying no is not cruelty, it is clarity. You learn that stepping away is not coldness, it is self-respect. And you begin to see that your sensitivity once used against you is actually your most precise form of intelligence. As this transformation deepens, your relationships shift. You no longer respond to guilt, flattery, or urgency the way you once did, because your intuition now sits in the driver's seat, and the patterns that used to trap you lose their power. Instead of absorbing other people's emotions, you observe them. Instead of trying to fix everything, you choose what actually aligns with your values. Instead of over-explaining, you let your boundaries stand on their own. Professionally, this awakening reveals your creative power because you stop agreeing to roles that depend on your silence or compliance, and you step into responsibilities that honor your depth and your insight. You discover that your presence itself becomes more commanding, not loud, not forceful, but unmistakably grounded. At its core, this is the transformation Jung warned us about. When an empath stops being controlled by fear, confusion, or self-doubt, they become a person who cannot be manipulated, and that makes them dangerous only to the patterns that once thrived on their softness. Their sensitivity becomes strength, their intuition becomes strategy, and their inner light once dimmed to comfort others begins to shine with quiet authority. And when this happens, the empath no longer moves through life as someone who survives the world. They move through it as someone who can finally see it clearly. If this message resonates with you, comment below. I am stepping into my dangerous awakening. Your words help anchor your transformation and support our spiritual wisdom community. 2. From victimhood to conscious power. Empaths spend much of their lives moving through families, workplaces, and relationships as emotional shock absorbers, quietly taking on pain that was never theirs to hold. And Jung explained that this pattern does not come from pure love, but from an unconscious fear of abandonment that conditions you to soothe others before you soothe yourself, making you believe that peace depends on how well you bury your own needs. Yet this fragile balance eventually shatters, usually through a deep betrayal that forces you into a moment of undeniable truth, where the breakdown becomes the doorway to a higher form of spiritual development and the awakening of the self you once hid to survive. In that moment, you begin to see clearly how long you've mistaken self-sacrifice for loyalty, how often you diluted your intuition just to maintain harmony, and how deeply you believed that love had to be earned through endurance. As the shock settles, something powerful rises. the parts of you that were pushed into the shadows. Your instincts, your intelligence, your emotional boundaries, and the righteous anger you were taught to suppress emerge as strength, clarity, and inner truth, revealing that your sensitivity was never a curse, but a form of spirituality that becomes sharper once you stop giving yourself away. This shift is what Jung described as shadow integration, the moment when you stop existing as the wounded healer and begin reconnecting with the self you abandoned long ago. And this integration turns the empath into someone dangerous only because they can no longer be manipulated by guilt, chaos, or emotional games. You start recognizing patterns before they unfold, sensing truth beneath tone, and refusing to shrink yourself just to keep the peace. And because you finally see your own worth, the old survival behaviors dissolve. People-pleasing loses its grip. Silence is no longer your prison, and relationships built on emotional imbalance can no longer survive your presence. This transformation deepens as you reclaim your own energy, no longer pouring your compassion into people who drain it, no longer apologizing for your intuition, and no longer trying to heal others at the cost of wounding yourself. And what once felt like weakness becomes your inner authority, guiding you toward connections that honor your emotional truth rather than exploit it. Through this awakening, you become someone who does not fear losing people who were never committed, someone who embraces conflict when necessary because truth matters more than approval, and someone who recognizes that love without boundaries is not love, but self-erasure. Jung believed that this stage is where an empath becomes whole, because you stop living from fear and begin living from consciousness, stepping fully into the person you were meant to be before the world taught you to disappear. And as this transformation unfolds, its message becomes unmistakable. You were never meant to carry suffering that was not yours. You were never meant to trade your peace for acceptance. And you were never meant to forget your own power in order to keep others comfortable. True spiritual development begins when you stop abandoning yourself, when you trust the wisdom of your sensitivity, and when you choose to stand in the clarity that has been inside you all along. 3. Shadow integration and psychological wholeness. In the language of Carl Jung, this stage of your evolution is the nigredo, the inner dusk where the false self finally collapses under the weight of truth. And for an empath, this collapse almost always begins with betrayal. Betrayal forces you to look at the very things you tried to avoid, because the moment someone breaks what little trust you had left, the unconscious rises to the surface with a force you can no longer suppress. It is the breaking point that becomes the breakthrough, pulling you into a depth of awareness you didn't know you possessed. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, Jung warned, and this is the precise moment when that truth becomes real within you. As the emotional chaos settles, something extraordinary forms inside you, a calm that is not numbness, but integration. Your emotions and your intellect stop fighting each other and instead merge into a single, razor-sharp lens through which you see people clearly, not through fear, not through hope, and not through the stories you once told yourself to maintain peace. This alignment between truth and perception is the birth of psychological wholeness, and manipulators feel it immediately, even before you do. They sense that you are no longer accessible in the old way, because the buttons they used to push no longer exist. The version of you who absorbed blame, softened red flags, and excused harmful behavior has quietly died. From this inner stillness, your voice changes. You don't speak from anger, you speak from precision. You no longer raise your voice, yet your words strike with the accuracy of someone who finally sees all the invisible patterns at play. This is why your clarity terrifies people who once depended on your confusion. They cannot twist your emotions because your inner world is no longer fragmented. They cannot pull you into arguments because you no longer dance with dysfunction. You simply state the truth as it is, and the truth itself becomes confrontation without needing confrontation. This shift is subtle but powerful. You stop explaining your boundaries, and you stop apologizing for seeing what you see. You stop mistaking kindness for silence, and you stop negotiating your worth. As you integrate your shadow, the part of you that once held fear, hurt, denial, and old patterns, you become someone who cannot be deceived, because everything that once hid in darkness is now illuminated from within. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And in this transformation, you finally reclaim authorship over your fate. What truly makes the empath dangerous is not aggression, harshness, or emotional withdrawal. What makes you dangerous is your wholeness. It is the steady, grounded awareness that sees through manipulation before it begins. The calm refusal to engage in chaos. The silence that exposes lies more effectively than confrontation ever could. You become the kind of person who dismantles illusion simply by telling the truth plainly. Your presence becomes a mirror that people with hidden motives cannot tolerate, because your clarity reveals everything they hoped you wouldn't notice. And in this integrated state, you finally understand that your greatest power was never your sensitivity alone. Your real power is the union of sensitivity and awareness, the ability to walk through darkness with light that does not flicker, and to recognize that the most dangerous empath is the one who can no longer be controlled by anything outside of themselves. Have you ever faced your shadow and embraced it with compassion? If you have, share your experience in the comments to inspire others on their path of healing. If not, the comment, "I'm ready to face my shadow," today marks the beginning of your journey towards psychological wholeness. 4. Selective empathy and boundaries. Selective empathy is the moment an awakened empath learns that loving everyone without limits is not divine. It is self-erasure. True spirituality teaches that compassion without boundaries leads to exhaustion, and empathy without discernment becomes emotional dependency. Boundaries are not cold walls. They are sacred lines that define where your light ends and another's begins. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the awakening of the soul into its authentic self, free from the prison of others' expectations. To care selectively is to love consciously, with awareness rather than impulse. It means understanding that you can hold compassion for someone's pain without making their suffering your home. When you stop rescuing everyone, you begin rescuing yourself. Boundaries are not rejection. They are the language of self-respect. They teach others how to meet you, how to value your time, and how to honor your energy. This is not selfishness. It is clarity. Imagine empathy as a river. Without banks, it floods and destroys. With boundaries, it flows with strength, direction, and purpose. You are that river. When you allow your energy to spill into every broken vessel, you weaken your current. But when you create banks of discernment, you nourish the land that truly receives you. Selective empathy does not mean loving less. It means loving wisely. It transforms pity into empowerment and obligation into conscious choice. You stop giving from guilt and start giving from wholeness. Jung's vision of individuation is not about separating from the world, but returning to it with your soul intact. It is the sacred journey from reaction to response, from confusion to clarity, from people-pleasing to peace. In spiritual awakening, you learn that every no, said with truth, creates space for a deeper yes, aligned with your purpose. You stop absorbing every emotion around you like a sponge and start radiating light like a lighthouse guiding, not drowning. This is the heart of spiritual maturity. Understanding that love without boundaries becomes chaos, and empathy without structure becomes suffering. As you evolve, you begin to recognize the difference between compassion that heals and compassion that depletes. You no longer apologize for protecting your peace, because peace is your highest service to the world. When you stand firm in your truth, you allow others to find theirs. And this is where spirituality and spiritual awakening converge, where empathy becomes strength, boundaries become freedom, and your soul finally stands unshaken in its own divine clarity. 5. Trusting intuition and reclaiming power. You begin to awaken the moment you stop doubting your own perceptions and start honoring what your soul has always whispered. This is where spirituality becomes a living force, and spiritual development transforms from theory into embodied truth. When you start trusting your intuition instead of dismissing it, you instantly become immune to gaslighting, because you no longer rely on external validation to confirm what you already know internally. The empath, who once absorbed everyone's emotions unconsciously, now evolves into a conscious observer who sees manipulation in real time, yet chooses not to engage. You begin to understand that awareness itself is power, because you can see through illusion and still stay calm within it. And as Carl Jung wrote, true power is not about domination. It is having the capacity to destroy, but choosing not to. In that restraint lies your quiet authority. You realize that every reaction, once stolen by fear, now becomes a deliberate response guided by clarity. When others try to provoke you, you no longer defend or justify. You simply recognize energy for what it is and decide if it deserves your participation. This is emotional maturity at its highest form, where control no longer comes from suppressing feelings, but from mastering the energy behind them. Your silence begins to speak louder than your words. Your boundaries radiate self-respect, and your presence naturally commands peace. In this state, you embody compassion without becoming a savior, because you finally understand that saving yourself first is what truly serves others. The empath's transformation is not about becoming harder. It's about becoming clearer. You no longer mistake empathy for obligation or kindness for submission. You understand that saying no is a sacred act of self-love, and holding space for your truth is the most profound expression of compassion. You integrate the shadow you once feared, your anger, your grief, your intuition, your authority. And in doing so, you stop fragmenting yourself to fit into other people's comfort zones. Integration gives you freedom, and freedom gives you peace. You no longer hide your fire to keep others warm. You learn to be the steady flame that lights your own path, illuminating truth without burning yourself out. From this awareness, daily life becomes a spiritual practice. Before you respond, you check in with your body. What does my intuition feel right now? You let silence guide you before words do. You allow truth to rise without rushing it. Every decision becomes a reflection of inner trust rather than external pressure. You start noticing that energy never lies, and manipulation can't exist where there is awareness. You stop absorbing pain that isn't yours, because you now see it clearly and release it with compassion. And as this mastery unfolds, you realize that spiritual development is not about becoming untouchable, it's about becoming unshakable. You hold your peace like a sacred instrument, and your restraint becomes the ultimate symbol of strength. You live Carl Jung's insight every day. Real power is measured by what you choose not to destroy. Through trust, awareness, and integration, you become your own sanctuary, a living embodiment of spirituality grounded in truth, grace, and unwavering self-respect. If this message helped you trust your inner voice a little more, don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on reclaiming your power and walking boldly in your truth. 6. The mirror effect and ethical strength. When an empath truly awakens, they become a living mirror reflecting truth so clearly that it leaves no place for deceit to hide. Around them, those who are genuine feel a deep sense of safety, while those who manipulate feel the walls closing in, exposed by the empath's quiet discernment. Yet as Carl Jung warned, when the shadow is integrated without moral grounding, the line between clarity and corruption begins to blur. Power, when not guided by compassion, becomes a weapon disguised as wisdom. True spiritual wisdom lies not in seeing everything, but in knowing what to do with what you see. Some awakened souls use their insight to heal. Others, consumed by pain, use it to punish. The difference lies in intention. An empath who walks the higher path chooses conscious love that is not naive, but fierce and discerning. It is the love that tells the truth even when it trembles, that protects without controlling, that forgives without forgetting the lesson. When your empathy evolves into awareness, you begin to understand that sensitivity is not weakness, but refined perception. You see through manipulation, not to judge, but to liberate yourself from it. Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. To know your darkness is to take responsibility for your shadow before it takes responsibility for you. It is to understand that your emotional radar, once used for pleasing others, can now be used to honor truth." But Jung's final warning echoes. If you awaken your shadow without anchoring it in ethics, you risk becoming what once hurt you. Many empaths fall into this trap, mistaking control for care or revenge for justice until they realize that power without love is hollow. To live with spiritual wisdom means to choose awareness over impulse. It is not about proving others wrong, but about staying right within yourself. Every boundary you set becomes a statement of self-respect. Every silence you keep becomes a refusal to feed chaos. You do not fight darkness with more darkness. You disarm it with clarity. You learn to walk away not out of fear, but out of faith that peace is more valuable than validation. And so, The empath's most dangerous transformation is not the ability to expose others. It is the ability to stay kind while being fully awake. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." To live this truth is to let your empathy mature into strength, your perception into purpose, and your heart into an instrument of discernment. When you combine compassion with conscience, love becomes both your sword and your shield. This is the sacred balance of power and mercy, the mark of a true, awakened empath who no longer absorbs the world's pain, but transforms it into light. 7. Transformation in relationships and society. In love, the awakened empath no longer confuses chaos for passion or emotional rescue for love. They now crave emotional maturity, honesty, and balance. They are no longer drawn to drama or the thrill of fixing others because their spiritual awakening has taught them that true connection is born from clarity, not confusion. They stop chasing those who drain their peace, and instead, they become magnetic to those who meet them in truth. Every relationship now reflects the level of their healing. Those built on illusion dissolve, and those rooted in authenticity grow stronger. As Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the awakened empath, fate is no longer a trap of unhealed patterns, but a conscious choice made through awareness. In family dynamics, this transformation shakes the foundation of old roles. The empath, who once absorbed everyone's pain, who once played the peacemaker, fixer, or silent sufferer, begins to withdraw from those toxic scripts. They stop trying to save what refuses to change and understand that healing does not mean carrying everyone's burdens. Their refusal to participate in dysfunction forces the system to evolve or collapse. And this collapse, though painful, is sacred. It reveals the truth that love without respect is control, and loyalty without boundaries is self-betrayal. Through this process, spirituality becomes practical. It is not about endless forgiveness, but about alignment with what honors the soul. The awakened empath finally says, "This is where the cycle ends with me," turning generational pain into generational wisdom. At work, their perception sharpens like light through a prism. They no longer endure environments fueled by manipulation, fear, or power games. They sense toxicity before it takes form, hearing the hidden tones behind words and feeling the weight of false intentions. The awakened empath aligns their career with integrity and purpose, choosing work that nourishes rather than depletes. They understand that success without peace is failure in disguise, and so they walk away from anything that compromises their spirit, even if it looks impressive from the outside. In doing so, they redefine success not as status, but as authenticity. Their spiritual awakening becomes a silent revolution against exploitation, proving that peace and purpose can coexist. In friendships, they no longer gather people to fill a void, but to share a vibration. Their circle grows smaller, yet more radiant. They no longer feel guilty for outgrowing those who refuse to evolve, because they have learned that energy is sacred currency. They now invest only in relationships where there is reciprocity, not obligation. Their presence no longer feeds dysfunction. It fuels truth. Every conversation, every connection becomes a mirror reflecting the depth of their growth. Friendships built on gossip or pretense fade, replaced by those who honor presence, honesty, and growth. Through all of this, the empath becomes what Jung once called the fully integrated individual, one who embraces both light and shadow without losing compassion. They no longer live at the mercy of emotions. They master them. They no longer seek belonging through pain. They embody it through peace. Their spirituality is no longer an escape, but a grounded awareness that transforms every corner of their life. Love becomes conscious. Family becomes truthful. Work becomes aligned, and friendship becomes sacred. This is the empath's true awakening, a life no longer powered by suffering, but illuminated by discernment, strength, and spiritual wisdom. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss more deep insights like this. Let's raise collective awareness and heal together through spiritual wisdom. Comment below. I am transforming with love and purpose. If you're ready to create conscious relationships and a better world. 8. Death and rebirth of identity. The death and rebirth of identity is one of the most profound stages of spirituality and spiritual development because it forces you to confront the painful truth that not everything you once were is meant to follow you into the person you are becoming. Carl Jung said that there is no coming to consciousness without pain, and you begin to understand this the moment you feel the old layers of your identity starting to fall away. The moment you realize that the roles you performed for acceptance, the patterns you kept for survival, and the personas you wore for love are no longer compatible with the truth rising within you. This inner shedding feels like loss, even when it is liberation. And as your false self begins to die, it brings with it a kind of grief that is difficult to explain, because you are not just letting go of people or habits. You are letting go of the version of yourself you presented to the world for years. And as this older identity dissolves, relationships that once felt familiar begin to feel distant. Conversations that once comforted you start to drain you, and environments that once felt like home become places where you can no longer breathe. What many people call loneliness appears, but for the empath in transformation, this loneliness slowly becomes sacred. It becomes a sanctuary where you finally hear your intuition without interference. A place where you no longer carry the weight of trying to be who everyone expects you to be. In this solitude, you begin to understand that separation is not abandonment. It is alignment. You are not losing people. You are losing illusions. You are not breaking down. You are breaking open. This phase is the metamorphosis Jung spoke of, the inner death that makes rebirth possible. And even though this transformation feels heavy, it is the first time you start to sense your real strength. The empath, who once absorbed every emotion around them, begins to recognize what is theirs and what is not. The person who once shaped themselves to fit the room begins to reshape the room with their presence. You start to understand that your sensitivity, once treated as a weakness, was always your compass. And now that you are no longer hiding it, it becomes your power. As the false identity continues to fall away, you stop apologizing for your boundaries, you stop explaining your intuition, and you stop negotiating your worth. You begin choosing peace over approval, truth over comfort, and authenticity over belonging. And with every internal shift, you step closer to the person you were always meant to be before the world taught you to shrink. This is the quiet rebirth, not loud, not dramatic, but steady and undeniable the moment you finally see yourself without distortion. It is the moment the empath evolves from a passive absorber of energy into an aware guardian of their own inner world. It is the moment you realize that the old self did not die because something was wrong with you, but because something powerful was awakening inside you. And as you continue walking forward, you begin to see that the death of the false self was not an ending. It was the beginning of the truest chapter of your spiritual development. The chapter where you finally live from your essence instead of your wounds, from your clarity instead of your fear, and from your inner truth instead of the expectations that once shaped your entire life. 9. Practical path to integration. You begin this path of inner integration by acknowledging suppressed emotions, because the truth is that the feelings you bury do not dissolve. They crystallize into quiet patterns that shape your choices without your consent. When you dare to name your grief, your irritation, your disappointment, your fear, or the exhaustion you have carried for years, you take back authorship of your inner life. Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And this is the cornerstone of your transformation. Allowing yourself to see what you once hid. As you breathe into these emotions instead of resisting them, your nervous system learns that truth is safer than denial, and you begin to release the weight you once mistook for personality. From this emotional clarity, you can finally reclaim your intuition and your self-trust, the two abilities society often trains empaths to abandon. You override your inner no to keep the peace. You silence your instinct to avoid conflict, and you distrust your own perception because others tell you that you are too sensitive. But intuition is not a weakness, it is guidance. Self-trust is not arrogance, it is alignment. When you start honoring even the smallest signals, a tight jaw, a sudden exhaustion, a shift in your gut, you begin rebuilding the internal compass that has always loved you. Self-trust grows not from perfection, but from keeping small promises to yourself until your inner voice becomes stronger than the noise around you. With this renewed clarity, you learn to practice selective empathy, a core expression of spiritual wisdom that protects you from emotional burnout. You no longer confuse compassion with responsibility because you finally understand that loving someone does not mean carrying their entire emotional world. You are allowed to witness without absorbing, to care without collapsing, to support without sacrificing your own well-being. You ask yourself simple but powerful questions. Is this mine to hold? Is this the right moment? Am I the right person? And if any answer is no, you step back with grace instead of guilt, knowing that boundaries do not limit love, they refine it. This inner strength naturally leads you to speak truth without fear, because silence that protects a lie becomes a slow betrayal of your soul. Your words do not have to be loud to be powerful. They only need to be clean. When you say what you truly mean, even with a shaking voice, you reclaim integrity as a lived practice instead of a concept. You discover who respects your honesty and who depended on your silence. Jung reminded us that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And truth-telling is one of the ways you honor that privilege every day. Finally, you build new boundaries and values your internal architecture for a life you can stand inside with dignity. Without boundaries, your empathy becomes a weapon others can use against you. With boundaries, it becomes a gift that flows instead of drains. You define what you will always protect: your rest, your solitude, your prayer, your creativity, your mental clarity, your emotional safety, and what you will no longer negotiate: disrespect, manipulation, guilt-driven expectations, or spiritual bypassing disguised as love. These vows become the quiet laws of your sovereignty, guiding your choices with steadiness instead of fear. When these practices weave together, feeling what you suppressed, trusting what you know, loving with discernment, speaking your truth, and honoring your values, you shift from survival into sovereignty. You no longer live as a sponge for other people's chaos, but as a steward of your own energy. This is the empath's most dangerous transformation, the one Carl Jung foresaw. Not a descent into harshness, but a rise into clarity, where your compassion finally has structure and your light finally has protection. 10. Becoming whole and dangerous to exploitation. Integrated empaths are not cold, they are complete, and this completeness is what makes them powerful in a world that once fed on their softness. They embody a balance that many people never reach: strong yet soft, compassionate yet boundaried, loving yet independent, sensitive yet unmanipulable. As you step into this level of inner integration, you begin to understand why Carl Jung warned that the most spiritually awakened empath becomes dangerous, not because they harm others, but because they can no longer be controlled by systems built on exploitation, gaslighting, and deceit. Every part of you that once apologized for existing now stands in alignment with itself, and that alignment becomes your shield. This transformation begins the moment you stop chasing approval and realize you no longer need permission to trust what you feel. When you cease outsourcing your sense of truth, the old power structures around you crumble. You recognize that what you once called kindness was sometimes a survival strategy, a way to keep peace, avoid conflict, and protect others from their own emotions. As your spirituality deepens, you reclaim your intuition not as a vague emotional reaction, but as a precise form of intelligence that reveals who is genuine and who is simply familiar with your triggers. With this clarity, you learn to separate compassion from compliance. Compassion honors your heart, while compliance sacrifices your boundaries. Once you understand the difference, you stop rescuing people from consequences they created. You stop translating disrespect into excuses like "they're stressed," and you stop stepping into roles you were never meant to carry. Every boundary you set without guilt sharpens your spiritual awakening, making your energy clearer and warmer, no longer distorted by fear or people-pleasing. This is when you start seeing the architecture of manipulation without absorbing it. You notice the tone that does not match the words, the stories that keep shifting, the apologies that only work if you silence yourself. When you trust these signals, deceit loses its power because it can no longer root itself in your compassion. As your inner balance strengthens, your worth detaches from self-sacrifice and reconnects to self-respect. Instead of giving to be chosen, you give from overflow. Instead of performing for love, you offer connection honestly. Instead of clinging to relationships built on potential, you choose those built on reciprocity. These choices make you dangerous in the most necessary way, because you no longer provide predators with the hiding places they used to find in your empathy. You stop being available to emotional chaos and start being consistent with yourself, saying no without apology, forgiving without reopening doors, loving without abandoning your own clarity, and listening without losing the sound of your own voice. This is the posture that intimidates exploitative people. You cannot be gaslit because you now verify. You cannot be drained because you now protect your energy. You cannot be deceived because you trust the truth your body communicates before your mind rationalizes it away. Each time you choose truth over harmony, you shift from peacekeeping to peacemaking. Peacekeeping silences you to keep others comfortable, but peacemaking restores what is real, even if it disrupts the illusion. This marks the moment your empathy evolves from a wound into a strength, from a liability into a gift, from a soft target into a clear presence that is loving but not permissive. In this integrated state, you no longer audition for acceptance or negotiate your worth. You belong to yourself more than to anyone's narrative, and with that belonging comes discernment. You no longer confuse intensity for intimacy, attention for affection, or proximity for loyalty. You no longer let gratitude blind you to patterns of entitlement. This is what makes the awakened empath truly dangerous to exploitation, not rage, not bitterness, but coherence. A coherent empath cannot be talked out of what they know, shamed into giving what they do not owe, or manipulated into rebuilding cages they have already outgrown. In this wholeness, your sensitivity becomes the wise instrument it was always meant to be tuned to truth, anchored in self-respect, and aligned with a spirituality that protects your light rather than draining it. In the end, Jung's warning is clear. When an empath finally integrates their shadow, trusts their intuition, and stops allowing the world to define their worth, they become someone who can no longer be controlled. This transformation isn't about becoming dangerous to others. It's about becoming unshakable within yourself. If this message from spiritual wisdom resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos on Carl Jung, healing, and inner awakening.